Dr. Astrid Tuminez, 7th President of Utah Valley University, thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Thank you for having me here.
In 2008, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said that a good 40% of college graduates take positions out of school that don't require a degree.
Yes.
And 1 in 5 college graduates still are not working in a degree-demanding job a decade after leaving school. Is getting a college diploma still worth all the time and money and effort it takes to get it?
Yes, getting a college diploma is still worth the time and money that it takes to get it. But the answer has to be given some nuance. So of course today, in the age of the 4th Industrial Revolution, we know that technology is upending everything and disrupting so many parts of life, the way we live, work, and play. It's all changing very rapidly. So today, actually, it is true more than ever that if you have certain skills or competencies, for example, in programming or cybersecurity, you can get hired very quickly. But if you look at what is called high-quality jobs and you measure those, the bulk of those still belong to areas where a bachelor's degree is required. So if you look at the state of Utah, there is actually a gap here between the number of jobs that are out there requiring bachelor's degrees and the number of college graduates with bachelor's degrees that the state of Utah is able to produce to fill those jobs. So there is still a gap.
Being not enough graduates to fill the positions.
Yes, not enough college graduates. So that's one part of the answer. Another part of the answer is how do we educate students today when we know that because of digital transformation, because of artificial intelligence and automation, 65 to 85% of the jobs that our current students will encounter someday don't even exist yet. So I think we need to continue teaching skills and competencies and subject matter expertise, but we also need to teach agility, open-mindedness, continue to teach good communication, collaboration, critical thinking, the ability to move fast, the ability to dialogue across differences, the ability to collaborate with people near and far. So this type of education may be a little bit different, but there is room for both what is traditional and what is truly different and innovative, and that's all happening.
For the high school graduate who wants to go to college and get a job that they learn about in college, what would you advise them? Because it sounds like the job market is a moving target for students who want to go. What would you tell them?
Yeah, so often I talk to students about learning to differentiate between what is a fad versus what is, long-lasting education. So today it's very popular to talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And in part, that is so true. STEM degrees today can land you, some very exciting opportunities in jobs, but that's not the entire story. When you talk about artificial intelligence, for example, experts talk about the necessity for people who are educated in the arts and the humanities who can inject empathy, fairness, transparency into the algorithms that we develop. And then again, back to the soft skills. For high school students, they need to learn not just the subject matter expertise, but the soft skills. Again, agility, flexibility, thinking critically, communication, collaboration, all of those are still really, really important.
Since about 2014, the number of women graduating from college exceeds the number of men graduating from college. Number one, what does that tell us about women in our society, and what does that tell us about men in our society?
So it's not just in the United States, but in other parts of the world, there are more women, not across the world, but there are many more women now entering college and then graduating from college. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the aspirations of girls and women and the support of their families, their societies, and their cultures for them getting an education, that's becoming stronger and stronger. It also tells us that more and more women are entering the labor force in ever greater numbers. What that doesn't tell us is whether women are succeeding as they build those careers and in their leadership journeys, because I think the tradition where as you rise up to the top, there are fewer and fewer women, that is still true. But I think it is very exciting to watch these women, get an education, because whether you're talking about the family or society or organizations, we know that the input of women, the voices of women, the perspectives of women are extremely important. The world is worse off if we don't have those perspectives. So I think it is exciting to see that development, but in my own observations and actually in my own career, I've kind of puzzled over how you allow women to stay on in the paths of leadership, both at home and at work and in society at large, and have greater representation perhaps at the very top echelons of leadership.
You are the very first woman to be president of Utah Valley University.
That's correct.
How is UVU different because you are a woman?
I'm probably not the right person to ask that question. You should ask UVU. When I was selected to be president, everybody asked me, how does it feel and what are you going to do? And the first thing, of course, I said it feels wonderful. It feels wonderful to be here, to be president of a marvelous institution where leaders before me have built a strong foundation. But I also reminded people that there was not some magic key turned in the lock that all of a sudden produced a female president. I reminded people that my coming into this position and the other women presidents of universities in Utah, it's preceded by years and years of hard work and perseverance and persistence. And I bring into this job my own unique perspective as a professional, as a mother, as a wife. And I do think that there are gendered experiences. So I've always worked in a world of men. I always have. My first big job was in the Soviet Union. And
what did you do there?
I was running a project for Harvard University. I was in my early 20s, and if you know Moscow at all, in the Russian culture, even if you had a PhD, they ask you to make the coffee. And in that setting, as young as I was, as tiny as I was, I learned to walk into a room which would be 95% men from the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from the top think tanks, and I had to learn to command a room within 5 minutes. So when I talk to female students, I talk about these types of experiences. When I talk to mothers at UVU who are navigating motherhood and education, I can tell them about my own struggles as a mother. I have 3 children, and my discovery of my ability to multitask. Because at the end of the day, I learned that, I could be a mom and work on Wall Street and still have the things that I want to have in my life. So I do think that my experiences, and some of it could be generalized, and some of it's unique. But I can talk about these experiences as a full person coming into UVU, and hopefully these experiences make me a better leader and a better president.
You graduated summa cum laude from BYU in Russian literature and international relations. You got your master's degree from Harvard and your PhD from MIT. I'm so sorry you didn't take advantage of educational opportunities along the way.
I'm a slacker.
Yeah,
so
apparently. Apparently. You're also a wife and mother of 3 children.
Yes.
Tell me, how do you balance your academic, your professional, and your family life?
Yes.
How does that work?
I get asked that question a lot, and I usually start out by saying that there is no balance. What I mean by that is any endeavor of excellence, whether you want to be a top concert pianist, or you want to be an Olympic athlete, or you want to be a great mom, everything requires such tremendous commitment and energy and time and planning. And so there is no balance. If by balance you mean that I live a life where all the schedules work and I get 8 hours of sleep, there are all these trade-offs. So I don't sleep very much. And I have a great partner. I don't think that I would have I could have done everything that I've managed to do without my husband. And that partnership began even before we got married, where, you know, we had this understanding that his dreams mattered and my dreams mattered, and we were going to support one another. So that dialogue, that honest dialogue took place early in our relationship. And then I kind of get used to chaos and insanity, but I also really subscribe to self-care. I've learned sometimes the hard way that I need to listen more to myself, and when I need that time for myself to be quiet and to be all alone, or to take care of things that need to be taken care of, I have to do that. I took up running in my 40s.
Really?
And taking up running has preserved my sanity and my health and my ability to maintain all these things that I want to do. And I think that you know, it's also important to be self-forgiving, because at the end of the day, you just have to say, I did my best, and some things fell apart, but that's how it is. And you know, to live life maximally and joyfully. I am a big believer in that I am responsible for the one life that I have to live, and I want few regrets, and maybe even no regrets if I could do that at all. So there is no balance, but there is self-care, and there is an honesty to the ambitions that I have and what I want to do with my life.
You are a product of the slums of the Philippines, and there are, to this day, still millions of other people who are in the slums of developing nations around the world. And yet, here you are, the president of a very large university with a master's and PhD, and having worked as an executive at Microsoft in charge of major projects around the world, here in the United States and Asia. And how do you account for your rise to where you are now?
So my growing up years in the slums, I think, were really quite important. And I want to underline that what changed the trajectory of my life, I could have stayed there in those slums to this day, because my playmates are still there. I last visited in June of 2018, and some of those playmates are still there. Some of them have been widowed, you know, very violent and terrible tragedies in their lives. So what really saved me and my family was that when I was 5 years old, nuns from the Daughters of Charity, a Catholic order, found my family and offered us the chance to go to their school for free. So without exaggerating, education changed the trajectory of my life. So that's one thing to say about the slums. The second thing to say about the slums is that is where I learned to let my imagination run free. So I lived in a hut on stilts in the water. My father had 7 children. My mother left when I was 5. And my father earned the equivalent of about $50 a month. So in that setting where you don't have a lot of external stimulation in terms of books or radio or television, we had none of that. You really had to imagine a lot of things. And I think that was a really, really good thing, because I imagined my possibilities really wildly. And that's really good. And the third thing that came from the slums is the grittiness and the can-do attitude that has really served me well in my entire life. So, for example, you know, my shoes had holes at the bottom, and one day I found lollipop wrappers, and they looked waxy and waterproof, so I just stuffed them in my shoes, thinking that when it's raining, they looked waterproof. You know, so you learn to think about, what can I do in terms of toys? What can I invent? How can I fix things? How can I problem solve? And I've come to the conclusion that poor people actually tend to be very smart, because for them, it is a question of life and death. Your margins of error are either non-existent or so narrow that you have to learn to be really, really clever in a street smart way. So whether your problem was disease or, you know, lack of toys, you did learn to invent. And I think it's a good thing. Of course, I don't wish it on anybody, because the dark side of that is, you know, is again, disease, tragedies, deaths that could have been prevented, drowning in my neighborhood that could have been prevented. But you kind of roll with that and then say, oh, what do I learn? You know, how can I do better so that doesn't happen to me? I had a neighbor, in fact, funny story. They had a little brother who didn't know how to swim. He was 3 or 4 years old. They just tossed him in the ocean.
To teach them how to swim?
Like sink or swim, literally.
Oh, my.
So, those were sort of very like punctuations in my life where I remember these things, and they taught me certain principles of how to live in a world that can be unpredictable and outright dangerous.
You most recently left a very lucrative and high-profile job at Microsoft. Why did you take this job as president of UVU?
Yes. So when I first learned about the job at UVU, I actually didn't immediately think that it was the right match for me. But as I learned about UVU, I became very intrigued with its model of higher education. It's a model that says to people, come as you are. It's open admission. And then it's also a model that says, we don't privilege one type of higher education versus another. UVU has a dual mission, which means a university and a community college. So whether you're talking about vocational, career and technical education, or degrees in philosophy or social sciences, or literature, or cybersecurity, it's all there in one place. And I love that. And it seemed to meld very well with things I had learned at Microsoft, that the world was being turned upside down by technology. And the question that always puzzled me is, how do we expand the capitalization of human potential? How do you actually release human potential? And I'd been at Microsoft 6 years. I loved it there very much. It was a very difficult decision, but I also wanted to scale, the ability to influence even more lives and maybe really apply some things that I thought were important for higher education in one place. And then the other insight that I had, because I've had a very varied career, I've worked in philanthropy, I've worked on Wall Street, I've worked on the peace process in the southern Philippines, I led a project in Russia. I was asking myself, what is the one place where the things that I know how to do and the lessons that I've learned could be put to good use? And a university was the perfect answer. And I have family in Utah, and it just seemed like the perfect next step. So I have no regrets. It's been 8 months. I've loved it here in Utah, and I love UVU.
As a leader, both at Microsoft and also here at UVU, you have to know how to release human potential, as you mentioned just a moment ago. What would you say is the key to opening the eyes and the minds and the hearts of today's young people to see what they are truly capable of?
I think there are several things that are important. The first is sort of to accept yourself and love yourself. I think that's a very healthy starting point. And then secondly, have the curiosity to try things. So even if you didn't think you were college material, and so at UVU we tell people to begin with a 1-year certificate. It could be non-academic, it could be academic, and then work from that onto an associate's degree, to a bachelor's degree, and to a master's degree. So I think curiosity is a really important thing. And then I think third is, our young people, even as they have this access to all this information in the world, I think they need to understand that some structure and curating of that is still important, and you can get that from a university. And so I would encourage our young people to be curious, to love themselves is the first place to start. The sooner you learn to love yourself, the higher your chances are of succeeding. And at UVU, where we're building a culture of exceptional care, I think that sense of come as you are, and we help you build a place where you feel you can belong, and that's the first step towards success in higher education, and what I call later on the ability to live a productive and dignified life.
When you graduated from BYU back in, what was it, 1986? 86.
Yes.
You had dual degrees, one
Yes.
in international relations, the other in Russian literature.
Yes.
Number one, why Russian literature? Number two, how have you used that over your professional career?
So I will say to people that a degree in the humanities, such as Russian literature, can get you everywhere. And I mean that truly, because these degrees help you to read, to think, and to communicate. So that degree in Russian literature, where you could throw me a book on Dostoevsky, and I'm going to write an essay about 2 or 3 really central things from the brothers Karamazov or Crime and Punishment. That is a skill you can take into banking, you can take into engineering, you can take into technology, because few people in this world know how to, read a massive amount of stuff, synthesize, and then communicate that clearly. The reason for the dual degree is that as I was looking at Russian language and literature, I thought it would be important to bring in another element. So I went into politics and international relations, because one of my insights from studying Russian literature is that you could not separate Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and the poets and from the history and the politics of Russia. And that was a really important insight. So if you know a language and you know literature, but also if you can connect it to politics and economics and war and peace, you are a much more interesting and more marketable individual. So today, by the way, students, I think, are more likely to have these nonlinear lives. And the more they know about different fields of knowledge, the better off they will be in facing those jobs that do not even exist yet and being ready for them.
You speak 7 languages, correct?
6.
6, only 6.
Only 6.
My apologies.
And a little bit of Chinese.
And a little bit of Chinese, okay. What have you found is the value in speaking more than one language?
So the greatest value of speaking more than one language is that it opens a lot of doors for anybody who speaks those languages. So being in France and speaking French, being in Russia and speaking Russian, being in Kazakhstan, where I've delivered a speech to over 300 government officials, and being able to do that in Russian, which is one of their 2 official languages, it enhances your credibility. It opens the hearts of people to you. So I think you have more fun. So I think it's important to say that when you speak the language. And today, there's actually metaphorical languages. And the language often that I talk about today is the language of difference. So you have these literal languages that you speak, but what if you could also speak the language of someone's religion, or someone's culture, or someone's life experience, or someone's cuisine? It just breaks down a lot of barriers. And I think in the world that we live in today, which is at once smaller and also bigger, and more polarized, more complex, I think we need literally and metaphorically to learn to speak a lot of languages.
Tell me the story of what happened when you walked into that room in Russia to speak to all those men, those
Yes.
government leaders, and they asked you to get the coffee.
I could say in fluent Russian, I am not your coffee woman. and that, by the way, I have to tell you, speaking Russian really made a huge difference. When I one of my first trips to Moscow, I had to bring 10 computers with me and 2 printers, and they were promptly confiscated at Sheremetyevo airport. And I had to return the next day because I wouldn't pay a bribe. And I returned the next day and started at 9 a.m. in the customs department of Sheremetyevo with a receptionist. And by 4 p.m., I was with a gentleman running the entire customs area. And because I could speak Russian, I could work my way to the very top. And at the end of the day, I got my 10 computers and 2 printers without paying a ruble. And I think that's where, that's what happens when you speak the language and having that credibility. And I think, again, it softens people's hearts. You've bothered to learn their language. It really does open the doors and the hearts of people.
You have become a woman of great academic achievement, great professional achievement, and your family life appears to be a great achievement as well.
I don't know. Ask my children.
You have accumulated quite a bit of achievement and acumen in so many different areas. If you had to choose one characteristic that a person of your achievement needs to have in order to remain well-rounded, what would you say that is?
I think I would say resilience and grit, and they're both related. So resilience is the ability to pick yourself up when things don't go so well. And resilience often comes from being gritty. You're just not ready to give up. And it goes back to kind of my childhood that I had no luxury, actually, of giving up. And so resilience is really important when you are balancing having a healthy personal life, having your professional accomplishments, and being able to serve others, and maybe having a life that is more meaningful than just your ego. It's really important to be resilient because surprises will come your way. You will fail. There will be moments when you question everything. There will be moments when you feel like a slug, you know, and it is really important to be resilient and have a sense of humor about the whole thing. And so I think that that's what's helped me, because I've had my good days, my bad days, my great moments in my family life, my not so great moments in my academic career where I felt like I was just flailing. But never at any point did I say, you know, I'm gonna keel over and die now, never. And I think that's been a great gift because there's always, you turn the corner and something else amazing comes along. And that is so exciting. It just makes me feel so alive and so grateful that I stuck with it. And so I would just encourage everybody to kind of, you know, just keep going. Things get better all the time, no matter how you feel.
Well, Dr. Astrid Tuminez, 7th President of Utah Valley University, thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much.